I have a job that takes me into the forgotten corners of the city, the houses that time and sometimes fate left behind. We're a deep clean crew, specializing in the properties that have sat unsold for years. We scrub away the dust, the grime, and the ghosts of what used to be. But the house on Hemlock Lane, just outside the sprawl of Boston, wasn't like the others. It was heavier. Listen closely. I can still hear the creak of those attic stairs. If you've ever had a nightmare where you know something terrible is waiting for you at the top, but you have to keep climbing, that was Hemlock Lane. We knew the story. The Hawthorne family, pillars of their community, vanished one cold October night 3 decades ago. No forced entry, no note, just dinner half-eaten on the table and beds unslept in. The house has been legally vacant ever since. My name is Liam. I lead the crew. There's Marcus, our muscle and resident skeptic, a guy who thinks the scariest thing is an unpaid invoice. And Chloe, meticulous and sensitive. She's the one who always carries the heavy-duty air freshener, calling it her exorcism spray. "All right, team," I said, looking up the dark, narrow staircase hidden behind a pantry door. "The real estate agent wants this attic cleared first. Apparently, it's the only room they haven't touched since the incident." Marcus hefted his cleaning caddy. "Great. 30 years of dust, probably 30 years of dead rats. I bet the only secret up there is the amount of mold the city council is going to fine us for." Chloe didn't laugh. She just stared at the shadows. "Lim, it smells wrong. Not just dust. It smells like old copper and something sweet like dying flowers." We started up. The air grew immediately thick, cold, and strangely silent, muffling the usual traffic sounds you'd get even this far out. The steps were steep and fought every inch of our ascent. Creak, creak, stop. The temperature dropped as if a basement door had been opened in the middle of winter. When I finally pushed open the attic hatch, a cloud of fine gray powder billowed out. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing a cavern of forgotten things. Trunks stacked like tombstones, broken furniture shrouded in white sheets, and everywhere faded family portraits with eyes that seemed to follow us even through the dust. We were breathing in the Hawthorne's past. And then I saw it, right in the center of the room, distinct from the rest of the clutter. A massive iron-bound wooden trunk. It wasn't covered. It looked like it had been placed there deliberately, awaiting our arrival. The air in the attic was so heavy, it felt like being underwater. I ran my hand over the nearest sheet-covered object. It was a child's rocking horse, cracked across the face. "This place is a museum of sad," Marcus mumbled, already wiping cobwebs from a window. I walked toward the central trunk. It was made of dark oak, secured by a thick, rusted iron clasp and a padlock the size of my fist. The wood itself was etched with dozens of faint, scratch-like marks. Symbols, maybe, or just wear. "Finders keepers, right, Marcus?" joked, reaching for his crowbar. "Wait," Chloe whispered, her voice tight. She was staring at the wall behind the trunk. The plaster there was unusually clean, almost polished, but not by us. She pointed. "Look." Drawn directly onto the exposed wood beam was a single, intricate symbol, maybe a foot wide. It looked like a coil of wire crossed with a stylized, weeping eye. It was old, but the lines felt fresh somehow. Marcus ignored it and pried the lock. The metal shrieked in protest, a sound that felt deafening in the silence. The lid of the trunk groaned open, and a smell, worse than the dust, worse than the copper, rose up. It was a dense, acrid odor, like old blood and ozone. Inside, the contents were stacked neatly. First, a stack of brittle black and white photographs of the Hawthorne family. They were smiling in every one. Father, mother, and 2 children. Happy. Normal. Second, a bundle of what looked like children's drawings, but instead of houses and stick figures, they were filled with the same coiled, eye-like symbols we'd seen on the wall. And third, 2 leather-bound journals. I reached for the top one. It was faded blue, the cover embossed with the name Evelyn Hawthorne. I flipped it open, dusting the pages. The handwriting was elegant, looping. I read the date, October 14th, 30 years ago, just days before they vanished. I'm trying to keep a record, though I know no one will believe me. Thomas says it's stress. The children are quiet now, too quiet. They don't play, they only draw the symbols. Last night, the air itself shifted. I heard it, a whisper, right beside my ear, but the sound wasn't a word. It was the sound of a key turning in a lock that shouldn't exist. A key turning in a lock that shouldn't exist. That sentence hit me, a cold spike of dread. Marcus suddenly looked serious, his crowbar dropping to the floor with a clatter. "What is that?" he asked, his voice low. "It's the wife's diary," I said, my voice barely a tremor. "It's not just a story, guys. They didn't just leave. They were afraid."
We decided we needed to know what happened before we touched another thing. We sat on 2 dusty old chairs, passing the diaries back and forth, the only light coming from our phones and flashlights. The entries quickly became erratic, feverish. Evelyn wrote about a presence that only manifested in the shadows of the attic. She called it the quiet. October 20th. I saw its shadow today. It's tall and thin, but it has no head. It just has the symbol where the head should be. I told Thomas we must leave, but he says the symbol is a protection. He's wrong. He's so wrong. The children drew the symbol on their bedroom door last night. They told me it keeps the quiet from taking them, but I think it's what's letting the quiet in. Chloe found something in the other diary, Thomas's, which was less a diary and more a notebook of arcane research. It was filled with mathematical equations and dozens of variations of the coiled eye symbol. Thomas wasn't trying to escape the quiet. He was trying to communicate with it, to study it. He believed it was an interdimensional phenomenon entering our reality through their attic. October 24th. The threshold is almost stable. The symbols work as a stabilizer. Evelyn fears what she doesn't understand. We are pioneers. I can almost hear their language now, just beyond the frequency of human hearing. They promise knowledge, power. They promise a new way to exist. All we have to do is step through the door. They vanished on the 25th, I muttered, looking at the photos of the happy family. They weren't taken. They left. But where and with what? Suddenly, Chloe gasped, clutching her phone. Liam, the diary, the photo, the symbols. look at the last entry on the back of the family portrait. I grabbed the photo. On the back, written in a shaky, desperate hand, was one final, chilling message. It is not a door. It is a trap. We are its sound. As the horror began to sink in, and the true, terrifying depth of this mystery started to unfold, I have to pause for a second. If you're captivated by stories that twist the known world into something frightening and real, you should know that tales just like this one, real and spine-chilling, are waiting for you. Make sure you subscribe to ASMR Mysteries and hit that notification bell so you never miss another terrifying true story. Now back to the attic. The air was getting thicker.
The atmosphere had changed from dusty old house to actively hostile. It was suffocating. We were no longer archaeologists. We were intruders. Marcus, finally showing a genuine tremor of fear, stood up. "This is it. We call the police, we call the real estate agent, and we are out of here. We didn't see a thing." We all agreed, stuffing the diaries and photos back into the trunk. As I slammed the heavy lid shut, I heard it. A faint, distant, but distinct sound. It was the same noise Evelyn wrote about, a key turning in a lock that shouldn't exist. It came from the floor below us. "Did you lock the hatch when we came up?" I asked Chloe, my heart hammering against my ribs. "No, we didn't need to, remember? It's a pull-down stair, not a door." But the sound repeated, closer this time, accompanied by a heavy, thudding silence that erased all other noise. We knew instinctively that the only exit was now sealed. We looked around frantically. Marcus grabbed the crowbar. Chloe started hyperventilating. I realized that the coiled eye symbols weren't just on the trunk and the beam. They were everywhere now, faintly traced into the dust on the floorboards, etched onto the glass of the faded portraits, and drawn in thin black lines on the inside of the sheet-covered furniture. They seemed to be multiplying. "Thomas wrote that the symbols are a stabilizer," I said, my voice cracking. "I think the trunk and the symbols aren't a warning. They're the last piece of the machine. The thing they stepped through. I think it's still here, and the symbols are the anchor." As I spoke, the symbol behind the trunk, the large one on the beam, began to glow. Not with electricity, but with an internal pale blue light. It was slow, rhythmic, pulsing like a heart. The heat rushed out of the room, replaced by a cutting, unnatural cold. My breath plumed out in a white cloud. From the darkest corner of the attic, near the eaves, a shadow detached itself from the wall. It was tall, impossibly thin, and it swayed slightly. It had no discernible features, but the sheer density of the shadow, like a hole punched in reality, made my blood freeze. And where a head should have been, there was only the pale, pulsing blue light of the coiled eye symbol. The quiet. "Get out! Get away from it!" I screamed, pushing Chloe and Marcus back toward the closed hatch. But the shadow was fast. It didn't walk. It seemed to flow across the cluttered floorboards, dragging that terrible cold with it. It stopped only a few feet from us. The silence was absolute, yet the air was screaming with the unheard frequency Thomas Hawthorne had written about. It felt like my eardrums were being crushed. Marcus, finally facing a horror that his logic couldn't explain, swung the crowbar. It passed right through the shadow. There was no resistance, only a ripple in the air, and Marcus fell back, gasping, a sudden deep scratch mark appearing on his forearm, the faint shape of the coiled eye. I looked down at the trunk, at Evelyn's final desperate warning. "We are its sound." I realized Thomas was wrong. The symbols didn't stabilize a doorway, they captured whatever was used to open it. The Hawthorne family hadn't been consumed, they had become the bait.
the sound that drew the entity from its dimension, stabilizing it long enough for it to stay. And the trunk? It was the final catalyst, waiting for someone curious enough to open it and read the story. I ran back to the trunk, ripping it open. The journals, the photographs, the children's drawings, the history of the family was the fuel. The symbol on the shadow pulsed brighter, acknowledging my action, its cold presence pressing down on us like a collapsing star. "Chloe, the air freshener, the exorcism spray, give it to me." She fumbled, throwing the heavy aerosol can. I snatched it. It was useless against a cosmic entity, but I wasn't thinking about a clean scent. I was thinking about the only thing that disrupts reality: fire. I held the can and pulled out my old cracked Zippo lighter. The shadow flowed forward, reaching for me with a cold, impossibly long appendage of darkness. As the shadow lunged, I ignited the flame and hit the nozzle, creating a crude spitting flamethrower. I didn't aim for the shadow. I aimed for the trunk's contents. The journals, the photographs, the children's drawings, all the Hawthorne's final moments ignited in a bright, furious flash. The reaction was instantaneous. The shadow let out a sound that wasn't a scream, but a tearing, like silk being ripped across the entire universe. The blue light and the symbol on the beam sputtered, flickered, and then went dark. The immense cold vanished. The shadow snapped back, collapsing instantly into the wall, dissolving back into the original stain it had detached from. The terrible silence lifted, replaced by the ringing in my ears and the sound of Marcus coughing. We didn't look back. We didn't check the hatch. We scrambled down the narrow, now silent stairs, falling over each other, and ran out of the Hemlock Lane house as fast as our legs could carry us.
We never told anyone the whole story. We told the real estate agent that the property was structurally unsound and that the contents of the attic were destroyed in a small, accidental fire, a lie easily covered by a bribe and the pervasive, acrid smell of burnt oak. Marcus still has the scar on his arm, the tiny, coiled eye symbol, a small, dark reminder of what touched him. Chloe quit the cleaning crew a week later and moved out of the city. She sends me postcards, always signed with a single cryptic phrase: "Keep the quiet away." As for me, I still work in the forgotten houses of the city, but I never take a job with an attic. The house on Hemlock Lane is still there. It's still unsold. The real estate listing says it's waiting for the right buyer, someone who can appreciate its unique history. But I know better. That house, that trunk, and those symbols were just a lockbox, and we, the cleaning crew, were just the key. The secret in the attic wasn't a family history. It was a doorway, and the terrifying truth is that some doors, once opened, can only be closed from the outside. And sometimes they're just waiting for the next person to walk in.